Hey everybody, great to see you. I'm Tim Boehm, coming to you from Kings Mountain, North Carolina tonight. It is the hometown of House Speaker Tim Moore. And tonight we're going to get a chance to get to know Tim Moore a little bit more and his hometown of Kings Mountain. And a little later we'll talk about some of the big issues that are facing North Carolina, like those prison issues as well as judicial elections. But first, let's find out a little bit more about a young Tim Moore. So what was it like growing up in Kings Mountain?
I guess it's like any, most other places. It's a nice town. It was life, as a kid, of course, you're sitting around your family and your school and involved with youth at church. I mean, it just like I guess a lot of other kids in a small town, and sort of knew everybody in your class. And really, still see people around all the time. So it's you go away to school and then you come back and then you see folks you went to school with and you growing up, but then also your kids become friends with their kids, kind of thing. So it's it's interesting to see that cycle play itself out.
What was Tim Moore like as a kid?
I really didn't average student, not really. Super grades. Don't tell my kids that because I try to stand up for A's and B's. But I guess I was a solid B student. Certainly not a solid A student. But I worked a lot. My dad had a little convenience grocery store out in the country, and I worked there a lot. And so that was good because I developed, I think, a pretty good work ethic from working there. Pretty decent hours. I worked the summers and. Had a small group of friends I would do stuff with, but it was a great place to grow up, and I think it's been great for my sons. I think they really like living here as well.
And you've been into politics a really long time, right?
Well, a little bit. I got involved with our county party. Got involved as the Republican Party chairman for Cleveland County, and then I served on the board of governors for the university system when I was 26. Did a 4-year term there, and then after that decided that I was ready to run for office, and luckily ran for they redrew the districts in 2001, and in 2002 we had these single member seats that came up, and so Cleveland County had historically been a solidly Democratic county. So it was, there weren't very many Republicans that would ever get elected, at least from just the county. You had to be multiple county seat. But managed to go out and ran a grassroots campaign with knocking on doors, and the people were kind enough to give me a chance. And so I've been eternally grateful for that opportunity to serve in the legislature.
How did you become a Republican?
Really, philosophy. I'll say when I first registered, and by the way, this is the high school right here. You guys already visited.
Oh, yeah.
When I actually first registered as an 18-year-old, I initially registered as a Democrat because that's what I had kind of heard in school and just from the ones who were active in politics. But it was when I went to college and I got involved in really sort of a deeper level and really started diving into studying and understanding policy and politics that I realized that my personal philosophy was more aligned with the Republican Party. And so as a result, I got that's how I became a Republican. I was always I thought I was always a supporter of Ronald Reagan. I thought he was a great president. Still think he was a great president. And I think the ideas he talked about of limited government, strong national defense, lower taxes, those are the things that still are what make our country great, and it's still what I support and believe in.
So wait a minute, people think, a lot of Republicans think college makes them liberal, but you're saying it made you conservative.
I don't know that it didn't really make me conservative, but it's where I was, when you're in college and you're studying more, I knew what I was, I just didn't know what it was called, but I realized that I had a very conservative political philosophy, and what I always thought was interesting, and I think that far too often this is forgotten in the debate in academia and university, is it's actually the ideas, the conflict in ideas and the debate that actually helps a student or a person grow in whatever they believe. So one of the concerns I've had about the universities is that it not be overly dominated with just one school of thought or one philosophy, because then nobody really grows. And because the only way you grow in college and your understanding is by having that, being challenged, to defend why do you believe this or why do you believe that. And so that was a very good thing.
Did, a lot of Republicans really talk about small business a lot. You've talked about a lot today. So growing up with you working at your dad's store and did that sort of influence you too?
Well, it did, because it's a business that I saw him take over and build and really expand, and where he spent long days and long hours. I remember when he first bought it, when he was it. He would be the one going in the mornings and opening up the store at 6 in the morning and closing it at 9 at night, and he would do that 6 days a week. And then eventually, of course, he got where he could hire people and didn't have to work so much. And even today, he has his furniture store and works really hard there, and doesn't put in hours that he used to, but he's there about every day. And I'm self-employed. I have my law practice where you were, and it's me, and then I've got a legal assistant, and then I've got there's a lawyer who works some with me on a part-time basis. So, but it's one of those things where if you don't bring in the income for fees, you can't make the payroll. So it's it's on you, I guess. So I always have a respect and admiration for anybody who goes out and opens a business and knows what it's like to have to sign the front side of the paycheck. That way, but yeah, you're talking about the house. This little house right here is where we grew up, right there.
That one right there?
Right there on the corner. So a lot of neighbors. Some of the neighbors are still here, but it's a nice neighborhood. All the kids were around the same age. So everybody, all the kids are the same age. Everybody had a dog, and had these woods back here. Everybody played in those as a kid. So it's.
Next up, we learn a little bit more about the relationship between House Speaker Tim Moore and Governor Roy Cooper.
I actually have a lot of respect for the governor. I think he's a good man. He's raised great daughters. He's a good husband. He's certainly worked hard and served in the legislature. Was an attorney in practice, and then was elected as Attorney General and Governor. I mean, that's quite the impressive resume. So he's a good person, but we do have differences of opinion on issues, and occasionally, as political issues are, they get played out in a way where the two ideas have to get juxtaposed. But one thing that I've tried to do is to not make it personal, and not. I think we see in Washington all the time. It seems like things get really personal with people, and there's a lot of conflict, and that's really unfortunate when that happens. There's a way to, disagree without being disagreeable. So Kings Mountain's roughly about 10,000 folks. We're here in Cleveland County. We've got a number of manufacturers here, and we're a town that's growing. The issue for rural North Carolina has been, trying to keep up with the growth of the urban areas, and that's a struggle that we as policymakers have been working with a lot. But I can tell you here locally, a lot of good things are happening. You've got, of course, the bank we just walked past, this locally owned coffee shop. We've got a few empty storefronts, but things are coming in. And what you're seeing are the businesses that are locating in the downtowns all across the state tend to be small, locally owned businesses. And so I think anything we can do to help those is a good thing.
This is an old textile town, right?
It was textiles, and of course there's textile mills all around. Some of those have been adapted and reused for other manufacturing facilities. The brownfields law that we have in North Carolina that allows you to go in and remediate environmental issues from the past has been very good in terms of getting those back operational, and also cleaning up issues where there was were problems in the past. So it's been very helpful to see that done.
What do you think about the discussion of small towns? I mean, it appears like, Kings Mountain's been turning around, but there are still a lot of communities that are really struggling. How do, there's a fight over the sales tax redistribution a couple years ago. I mean, how do we balance this growth issue?
Well, it's not an easy question and it doesn't have an easy answer. And I think it really takes a matter of balancing the equities of recognizing that we're all in one state and that we're only as strong as our weakest communities. At the same time, when it comes to economic development, if a large high-tech company, for example, is looking at North Carolina, they're probably not looking at a small town like Kings Mountain. They're wanting to be in a Charlotte or a Raleigh or a Durham. They're wanting to be in those cities, so that when we as a state are competing to bring those companies here, we're competing with Atlanta, we're competing with Washington. So we need to make sure that when we're doing all we can for the small towns and the rural communities, that we are also have a plan in place that will actually take care of and provide for good competitive environment when it comes to the urban areas. I just wanted to point out there's a sign right behind you. I didn't want you to fall.
Safety first,
yeah.
Right? But, a couple years has passed since that redistribution battle over taxes where the urban areas, cities were to help the rural areas. Right. What are your thoughts on that now as that's passed? I mean, is that something we need to still consider again moving forward? Or?
I think some adjustment is probably going to be warranted as we move forward because there is an issue about the fact that folks live in neighboring counties, but they do their shopping in a urban area. You hear, for example, folks who live in Johnston County who do their shopping in Wake County, and should all of that tax money stay in Wake? Some would argue that Wake County is having to provide services for that because of all those folks coming there. Others would argue that that money should be able to go back to the home of those folks and their communities. So there's honestly good arguments on both sides. The key is trying to find that middle ground.
Do you think that's going to be a discussion in the next couple of years again?
I think it'll continue to be a discussion because as we keep making modifications to the tax code, changes which, by the way, have lowered the taxes, increased revenue, and made our state one of the best in the country. Forbes just came out last week saying we're one of the best states in the country to locate a business. It's actually number one. So as we continue to evolve our tax code, that will be part of the conversation.
Mr. Speaker, as we sit here, we're about 3 weeks out from the January special session. There's still a lot up in the air what might happen. What can you tell us today about what we might see in January?
Well, looking at a number of issues. We're looking at constitutional amendments, looking at the judicial redistricting reform bill. There are two different versions out there, so we're trying to sort through a compromise on those two things. We're also looking at some changes, some tweaks to the budget that may or may not need to be made right now. That's still being discussed. Those are really some of the main items. We're also looking at the Gen X issue, making sure that everything is in place to deal with the river contamination issue. Our coastal legislators have been working very hard to come up with something on that, and a few other things out there that are still being discussed right now. But we do intend for it to be a very short session.
Well, I was going to ask, a few days or?
Yeah, the hope is it will just be a few days. And in fact, we may actually come into session and then recess until a later date. But we don't know yet. One thing, of course, we're watching to see what happens if we need to do anything on the legislative redistricting. So we do want to keep an eye on that as well.
Let's talk about the judicial redistricting for a minute. It seems like the Senate obviously has a set of maps as well now. There's still talk about what to do with how we select judges. I get a sense from the Senate that it may just be about redistricting at this point. Do you want to see how we pick judges now or later?
That's a tough question. And what I say is that the judicial districts that we have right now were basically set up 50 years ago. In 1968, when the consolidated court system was organized. There have been tweaks along the way, but the current judicial districts we have right now are not proportional in terms of population or in terms of caseload. So they do need to be changed. So the issue is, and the battle is, how do you change them? And so that needs to happen. There is talk also of moving to a merit-based selection of judges. Now, that may end up being just appellate judges, Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, may include trial court judges. The track that the House has elected to go, that I've elected to proceed on as the Speaker of the House, is really to make sure that we're doing the right thing by the judicial districts, and we'll look at other changes, but we want to try to make sure these districts are taken care of. because when it comes to the change to the method of choosing judges, we can't make that change. That's a constitutional amendment, so that goes to a vote of the people.
Is it safe to say then that's not something that appears to be on the agenda for January?
I wouldn't say that. I think it's very possible if we can get to some consensus on it. But we need a 3/5 vote to pass that. Frankly, we probably need a 3/5 vote to pass any of these. I know we have the 3/5 vote on the judicial redistricting. I don't know that we yet have that vote when it comes to merit selection. But in all honesty and in all fairness, there has not been a detailed plan laid out before the members to say this is the method of doing it, because there's different ways you could do it. You could have a process where the General Assembly does it itself, like it's done in South Carolina and Virginia, or you could have a process where there's it's narrowed down to a group of individuals for a seat, and then the governor makes that appointment, or you have a governor's appointment and judicial and in confirmation by the legislature. There's so many different variables that have been discussed. There's not a set plan that we've been able to put in front of members and say, how do you feel about this? So until we do that, we won't know.
Democrats have accused that Republicans want to pick judges. They want the legislature to do it. Would you support that kind of system?
I would support a merit-based process of selecting judges at the legislative level. I would support that, and I'll tell you why. Number one, if you ask people across the board, many don't know who the judges are, who they're voting for. One of the reasons to bring back the partisan label is at least to give voters some idea of a judge's philosophy. Okay. The challenge, though, when it comes to not voting on that by the people, is that the people would have to vote in a constitutional amendment to give up their right to vote on those offices. And historically in North Carolina, voters have not wanted to do that. So I think it's, at the end of the day, if we go that route, it'll be up to the people to decide. But I know historically, anytime that's been discussed, that's always been a pretty tall order for folks to do that.
Regardless of who's in power, though, do you think it's wise for legislators to be picking judges as opposed to a system where both the executive branch and the legislative branch take part in it?
Well, when we talked earlier, I mentioned something to you that my answer is yes. I think the General Assembly could do that in a fair way if the process is set up the right way.
Hey everybody, great to see you. I am Tim Boyum. Welcome to a special edition of Capitol Tonight. We're coming to you tonight from Madison, North Carolina. This is sort of the hometown area for Senate Leader Phil Berger. He's actually from Eden up the road, but he has a law firm here in Madison. And tonight, we're going to get to know more about the Senate Leader, what makes him tick, and of course a little later we'll talk about some of the big issues facing North Carolina, including his relationship with Governor Roy Cooper. But we start here in Madison and get to know a little bit more about Senate Leader Phil Berger. So tell us what it's like to, what is this area like? What is this?
Okay, so we're in Madison, which is small town, 2,000, 3,000 people. It's in western Rockingham County. It's immediately adjacent to another small town about the same size, Mayodan. So the Madison-Mayodan area is, together with the town of Stoneville, kind of western Rockingham County.
And you live in Eden, right?
I live in Eden, which is 12, 15 miles from here. We have a law office here. I also have a law office in Eden. So, but Madison is an old town. It organized in the early 1800s. It has over the years been a trading center for western Rockingham County and eastern Stokes County. You have a number of folks from Stokes County that trade here. It historically has been more of a tobacco town, and Mayodan was more of a textile-centered town. But we have textiles in both Madison and Mayodan, and
to this day.
To this day, yeah.
So it survived.
Much changed. A whole lot fewer employees, but still some textiles.
A lot of people, when they see video of you, you're in Raleigh, you're in your position, they don't think about you, in your hometown. How much does this drive what you do in Raleigh?
I think it would be impossible to separate where you live and kind of how you grew up from who you are today. And I grew up in Southern Virginia. Probably 40 miles from here, probably 20, 25 miles from where I live now. The people are just salt of the earth folks, and it's a part of who I am.
And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I do want to ask you too, one of my favorite stories about you is you're not a career lawyer, you're not a career politician. You got into this a little late in life, right?
Yeah, kind of. I got out of high school. Pat and I had been dating in high school. Went to 1 year of community college. Didn't think college was for me. Well, we got married, started a family. I started to understand how important education can be and what needed to be done. So went back to school at night. At that time, I was working at a grocery store. Was managing the produce department. Working full-time, took a full-time load the last 2 years at Averett College. And then as Pat would tell the story, I sold her house, quit my job, and moved to Winston-Salem to go to law school. I was 30 years old when I finished law school, a little bit older, not a lot older than most of my classmates. Then ended up, clerked at the Court of Appeals for a year, but ended up here in a practice, enjoyed it, still enjoy it, and at one point the opportunity came to run for the state legislature. I had always been interested in politics. I'd been on the Board of Elections in Rockingham County back in the 80s, and ran, was successful, and have worked very hard to try to bring what I think the people in this community, in this area, see as an appropriate role of government to state government. And I feel very good about some of the results that we've been able to achieve.
So how do you balance this community with where you go during the week in Raleigh and Charlotte? I mean, that's a challenge.
It can be a challenge at times. You know, there's a lot of growth in the Raleigh area. There's not nearly as much growth here. Obviously, we'd like to see more and have great expectations that there's a bright future. But it's different. I mean, this is a rural community. It is not the fast-paced, highly urban area of Raleigh. Yeah. So it's different. But my experience has been that people are people, and you have to in this life learn to communicate and work with people, whether their background is similar to yours or different. And I actually think it's probably a benefit to me to come from a rural area to an urban area, because for me it seems that the transition is a little easier.
Maybe you need to have field trips or take some of the urban folks out to the rural area and vice versa.
They're welcome to come to Rockingham County anytime. I'd be more than happy.
But it makes me think about the redistribution fight there was over taxes. I mean, is that something that still needs to be talked about, do you think?
Well, there are still real concerns about what is happening in North Carolina in terms of the rural-urban changes. That's not unique to North Carolina. No, you go to other states; they're seeing the same sorts of issues. So yeah, there are still some things that need to be talked about. There are real needs in our urban areas, but there are real needs in our rural areas as well. Some of those are things that government appropriately can try to deal with. Some of them are things that are caused by kind of larger economic trends that we're not going to be able to change.
You've been doing this a while now, is leading the Senate, but also in the state Senate. What do you want to do long term, and how long do you think you're going to keep doing this?
Tim, I enjoy what I do now. As I've told people over and over again, more than anything else I've done professionally, and I'm fully intent on continuing to serve in the North Carolina Senate as long as the people in my district are willing to send me, and do the best job I can.
I know you flirted with the U.S. Senate, or at least people made it seem like you wanted to maybe flirt with it. Do you ever think you might want to do that like someday?
I've had people talk to me about, are you interested in this? Are you interested in that? I haven't ruled out running for some other office, but at this point, the thing I'm concentrating on is being the best North Carolina senator, the best president pro tem that I can be.
We've been talking about your law quite a bit. What kind of law do you do, by the way?
Well,
in a small town, do you do all kinds of law?
I used to do law that actually provided a living, but now I used to do a good bit of trial work, had a fairly robust trial practice, primarily civil trials. Now I do some transactional work. I have a couple of clients that review contracts for, some folks that I do some administrative work for, but draw some wills, handle some estates, do that sort of stuff. It's the kind of thing that generally doesn't have a deadline. You've got to be here at a particular time, because unfortunately my schedule is such that I sometimes can't tell you where I'm going to be at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
That's hard though, isn't it? You live by calendar, right?
I do.
But you don't control the time.
Actually, I live by 3 calendars, my law calendar, the political calendar that some folks keep, and then my legislative calendar. And so trying to keep all those coordinated. One of the things that I learned pretty fast after we took the majority is that if someone calls and wants an appointment with me, I'm not the person to talk to. They have to talk to somebody else, because I was just unable to kind of keep all that straight. So I'm very fortunate I have folks that do a really good job of getting me to places where I'm supposed to be on time and making sure that I don't mess that up.
Do you ever get time to relax, or can you even relax anymore?
You know, I can. Pat and I spend time together. I like to read. I spend a good bit of time reviewing information either on the computer or reading materials. I enjoy that. I love sports, love baseball. So for me, particularly during baseball season, one of the best things for me to do is when I get home, kind of shut the phone off and turn on a baseball game and watch it. It almost doesn't matter who's playing.
Just the quiet, right?
That's right.
Next, we want to talk with the Senate leader about his relationship with Governor Roy Cooper. It's been pretty rocky over the past year or so. You guys keep coming back. You're going to be back in a few weeks here as well. What do you expect to happen in January?
I expect that we'll look at some of the governor's appointments that have been out there for a while. I've asked our substantive committees that have the areas of focus that the appointees are in to be talking to the nominees, trying to figure out whether or not we have a positive or some concerns about them. So I think we'll probably be in a position to hopefully move on some of those. I think the whole issue of the judicial districts is something that I don't know if we'll be ready at the time of January the 10th to move forward. I think it's clear we're going to have to do something. I mean, the select committee that we've appointed in the Senate has had Democratic constitutional experts come in and say that there are concerns from a constitutional standpoint on the maps that came over from the House, but oh, by the way, those same deficiencies exist in the current maps that have been in place for a long time. And so I think we're going to have to do something on that. Whether we can do that by January, I don't know, but I think we'll move on that at some point.
Could it wait till May?
I don't think it can wait till May, but we want to make sure we get it right, and that's the reason that we've appointed this select committee, because we're trying to get feedback from folks. I hope the Democrats, as a previous interview on one of your shows pointed out, I hope they'll submit proposals, because we'd like to hear what their suggestion would be, especially since the old maps, which they drew, have some of the same deficiencies that the maps that came over from the House seem to have.
But would you take those maps seriously?
Yes, I mean, really, what we're looking for is something that we've received feedback on, something that meets the constitutional standard, and something that actually gives the people, if we're going to continue to elect judges, an effective and a real voice in picking the judiciary.